Well, we got a lot of football to get into, the NFL draft and other things happening. John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, at JF McMullen, and he joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. John, all right, there's a lot happening here. First off, I know we don't typically get into the college football ranks all that much, but this gaining momentum that the 2020 college football season could be played from February to May, that's gaining some momentum. And I would first ask, I know the NFL doesn't have any much say over the NCAA, but that sounds like it would be wreaking havoc on next year's draft.
Yeah, it certainly would, and I don't know if that's the case. I mean, we're in such, and I've used that phrase a lot, such uncertain times. I don't think anybody has any idea when these things are going to happen, and that's the problem. And that uncertainty creates speculation, and people throw things out there and they say, well, maybe this can work. Ultimately, got to look at who's in charge, and Dr. Fauci had a interview today. He's been doing sort of these rolling interviews with Skype and someone on that platform, and he said basically he could see sports being back this summer in a fashion where essentially organizations, teams would be quarantined and play in empty arenas or empty stadiums. And I think that's the goal, to get it back much quicker than that. But we've talked about that in the past. You know, does anybody want to see sports in empty arenas, empty stadiums? I don't know. That's really up to the individual.
Yeah, I don't know, what your opinion was hearing, number one, Dr. Fauci coming out and kind of saying, yeah, I think we can, think about playing. The PGA apparently is ambitious enough to say, hey, we're going to play June 11th is when we plan on getting back out there. They even said that their plans on having fans at events by mid-July. I mean, it sounded like today that all of a sudden it was like an aha moment, like, hey, let's start playing sports and getting back to things, how that might change. And then on the flip side, John, you got the New Orleans mayor saying there's no events happening in my city for the rest of the year. Also, California has been very unambitious about having things happen. As we've kind of hinted at, this sounds like this is going to be a huge butting of heads.
Yeah, it's going to be the biggest political football in history. It really is. And it's going to be red versus blue, Republican versus Democrat. You're going to see this. And, the only thing they have in common, I say it all the time, is hypocrisy. And that's best exemplified by what you just said, Mike. You have somebody like the PGA saying, okay, we're going to get back out there in June. We're going to have fans by July. And, people will jump down their throat and criticize them, a certain group, say, how can you do this? And then you have the other side, New Orleans and California, before saying, well, there's no way we're going to be able to do anything the rest of this year. How do both sides know? Neither side knows. The PGA doesn't know if they're going to be able to go off and get back into business by June. I think that's fair to say. But I think it's also tremendously fair to say, why in the heck would you be shutting everything down for the rest of the calendar year when you don't need to? Other than trying to win points with a certain constituency. So the only word you can use is hypocrisy on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, I don't know why in the month of April that you would go on and say, I got nothing going on in my state for the rest, or my city for the rest of the year. It just doesn't make sense.
It's absurd. And I said the same thing with Herb Street in a sports fashion, said it about college football. How do you know? Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen next week. Never mind December, and you're saying, oh, we're not going to do anything in December. Well, I just tweeted this. There's just these awful layoffs in WWE today. They're firing everybody. And you have this one class is saying, well, this has got to continue in perpetuity, basically. We don't know when it's ever going to stop. And then the same people will just blast companies for laying off people. And my only question to them is, what the heck did you think was going to happen? If people can't do business, they can't hire people to do business. Mm-hmm. It's common sense.
Yeah,
it's very frustrating to me.
You're right. John McMullen's with us here. But the fact too that again, it's going to be some states saying nothing's happening, and let's say the NFL comes back. And some states are letting fans in and other ones aren't. I mean, as you mentioned, this is just going to be a mess going on. I mean, how they can even kind of compartmentalize what they're going to do with all that. I guess that's a good problem to have if we're back doing something here. But this whole college football thing, that to me, if they don't play this till February, I feel like the NFL would be in a really tough spot with all that.
Yeah, and again, I don't think that is anywhere near the case. I think if the NFL is going to play, I certainly think college football is going to play. It's not going to be a situation where the NFL is going to go off and college football is going to say, we're not going to play till February. I just don't see that happening. And again, that's why you don't throw these plans out there. But I turn towards Major League Baseball, and I think what they're trying to do is maybe going to be the template, and that's the fact that you are going to have this piecemeal. What we just said. Well, New Orleans, the Saints can't play at home. The 49ers, the Rams, the Chargers, in theory, can't play at home.
Right.
So what baseball is trying to do, everybody's going to play in Arizona. They're trying to ramp this up and get the season started.
Hard to do that in football.
It is, but you might have to have neutral site games, and that would affect the Eagles because this is an area where it would most likely be in the New Orleans, California category. So, when the NFL does get going, it's conceivable, and I wrote about this at Sports Illustrated, the Eagles might be playing, but might be at an empty Lincoln Financial Field or even more likely an empty neutral site field.
Yeah, and I know that the thought of football being in, okay, you were here in golf. I don't need any fans at golf. I've said I don't need the guy yelling, get in the hole. I don't care if there's fans at golf. A baseball game, okay, it'd be a little odd if there's nobody there, but whatever. A basketball playoff game, I think that's a big deal, not to have the fans, like the momentum shifting back and forth. But the fabric of this area of not having Eagles football for 8 Sundays, I think would be a devastating blow to the sports fan.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think anybody would like it, and I certainly think you have to start talking about competitive advantage, competitive disadvantage of if you're thinking about, say, teams in the Midwest that get to play in their home stadiums and teams in these hot spots, so to speak, don't get to play in their stadiums. I think another, and that's why I like the baseball model. You might have to go to Florida and use all the Florida stadiums. You might go to Arizona, right. Try to figure out something like that. If there's not going to be fans and there's going to be states that do not allow these types of things to happen, you got to come up with an alternative.
Could just picture how many NFL games are there in a weekend? 14, 15 games being played at various high school fields, playing at various high school fields across the state.
Yeah, the problem with that is, if you think about the money invested in these players, and you've seen it with in the past, you saw it at Old Veterans Stadium, Brian Billick walking off the field, not playing a preseason game. You saw it recently at the Hall of Fame, and they canceled the Hall of Fame game. because the field surface was not up to par. So it's not like you could just put NFL players on high school fields. There's probably a lot of college stadiums that could be serviceable. But it's just add yet another layer, because you can't just put professional athletes on fields like that. You just can't do it.
All right, John McMullen, at JF McMullen, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live 97.3. A lot of draft news today coming out. I guess, a lot of mock drafts dropping today, a lot of, conversation, more information, as you said, coming out. Yesterday we kind of brushed over the Mel Kiper Jr. latest mock draft, in which Henry Ruggs went to the Eagles at number 21, and Justin Jefferson, as you tweeted out, that him falling to 21 is starting to seem less and less likely. Well, let me ask you, do you think that means it's less likely that the fourth wide receiver would get to 21, or will 4 wide receivers go before 21 now?
Well, I do think personally, I think 4 are going before 21. I don't think Ruggs would reach that level, unfortunately, for the Eagles. It's looking clearer and clearer that Jefferson is just not going to reach that level. And people in the NFL seem to like him a little bit more than draft Twitter, as I always call it. So it's going to be difficult for the Eagles. They're going to be in that no man's land. If they want a receiver, they're going to have to go up and get one of that top 4, most likely, or fall back. And because you're in that spot where the next level, the Denzel Mims of the world, Jalen Ragers, they're probably not worthy of going at 21. So it's easy to say fall back, but you got to have somebody willing to come up, as I mentioned yesterday on the show. It's not always just snap your fingers and you have a trading partner. You got to have somebody who wants to do it. So at that point, it comes to be kind of difficult. You might have to take a different position if you can't find a trading partner.
Right, and you wonder, the Eagles are at 21. Which of the teams that are in front of them, around them, that are in play for a wide receiver? I saw the report that it's no secret the Raiders need to get better at wide receiver, and some teams in front of them that they're going to be kind of looking for, because I think about, all right, how many teams right in my area are going to be in play for a wide receiver before we go at number 21?
Yeah, the Broncos are another one, and that to me, because those are 2 wild card sort of organizations, and certainly with Mike Mack, you saw it last year, 4th overall. I mean, most people had Cleveland Farrell as a guy who was going in the 20s, and he picked him at 4. And when he had that, some people have been intimated to me that the Raiders could take Denzel Mims. So when I say that's the kind of wild card that they are, and they could throw a horseshoe into anything and just kind of mess up the board from what is speculated everywhere. They did it last year at a much higher position. They're certainly capable of doing it this year as well. The good news, though, if you start to talk about the quarterbacks and certain guys are going to go, and we've talked about Chase Young a lot. We've talked about the offensive tackles, and there's going to be at least 3, possibly 4 that's going before 21. So you start doing the math and you start saying to yourself, we talked about that a little bit yesterday as well. Everybody says this is a first-round pick. This is a first-round pick. Well, there's only 32 first-round picks. Yeah. So if you're saying 50 guys are first-round picks, somebody's got to fall. And I think the Eagles are still hopeful that one of the receivers they like falls. But if it's the conventional top 4 that everybody has as the top 4, certainly Lamb's not going to be there. Certainly Judy's not going to be there. So then you kind of speculate.
Were you surprised to see Kiper put and I know these are just mock drafts and whatever, but he's, probably one of the most well-known guys. To say Henry Ruggs is going to fall to 21, I think everybody associated. What is that saying about Jefferson, who seemed to be that fourth guy clearly? And again, as you tweeted out, that the likelihood of Jefferson being there at 21 is starting to dwindle.
Yeah, well, I think, as I said, people get more information, and as they talk to more teams and more executives, they start to realize, wow, teams in this league like this guy a lot better than some people speculated. And then you look at somebody like Daniel Jeremiah. If you go all the way back to Daniel, because of how close he is to the Eagles organization, he was the first one way early in the spring that put Justin Jefferson to the Eagles at 21 overall. At that particular time, most people didn't even have him as a first-round pick. And that's where you started this entire flood of 1,001 mock drafts that had Jefferson going to the Eagles. And you also have that sort of that contrarian narrative that says, oh, this guy's just a slot receiver. He can't play outside. He's not a good pick for the Eagles, because they're starting from that first group, that first wave that said this guy's not even a first-round pick. Well, it doesn't matter what somebody watching on Game Pass or YouTube feels. It matters what NFL teams feel. And now it's becoming clearer and clearer and clearer that they value this guy a heck of a lot. And it's not only Mel. Mel Kiper had his conference call with us today. Daniel Jeremiah is going to have a conference call on Thursday with reporters. Both of them now say Jefferson's not going to make it to 21. So he's probably not going to make it to 21.
Yeah, which I guess sounds a little bit discouraging. If he wasn't there at 21 and the Eagles are on the board on draft night and you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants here and you're Howie Roseman, what's your advice to him there? I mean, you got all, as you said, more information. Denzel Mims is a name. Somebody came out today, a scout, said he's better than Lamb and Judy. You're going to start to hear some crazy things here. You got guys, at that point, you're at 21. Do you take a flyer on the fifth guy, or do you say at this point, you know what? I'm going to move out of this spot. I'm going to go down.
Well, yeah, that's what I said. I think the best case scenario, if those four guys are gone, I think the Eagles would like to move out, fall back in the first round, not completely out of the first round, and take a Rager type, take a Brandon Ayuk type, somebody like that. We'll see where Denzel, you mentioned, I mentioned him as well. I could see him going anywhere from 12 to, 33. He could be an early second-round pick. That's how wide-ranging the thoughts are on him. If I were the Eagles and the options to me are Jefferson and Ruggs, and neither of them are there, I want to trade out. And I want to get one of those other receivers, but I want to gain some assets back in doing it, because you don't, in theory, need to take him at 21. But again, that's easy to say. You have to have somebody that's willing to come up. And right now, Minnesota is at 22. They made the trade with Buffalo. And they're also a team that wants potentially a receiver. Although they have other needs as well, could go in different directions. But point being, it's not as easy as just saying, okay, that guy's not there, we're going to get the heck out of here. Sometimes you can't find a trade partner, and then you got to go to plan B, plan C, and that's why, Daniel Jeremiah went down the linebacker route, which everyone firmly believes the Eagles will never take a linebacker in the first round.
You mentioned Daniel Jeremiah. I was reading The Athletic today. Brugler also had, and I was like, a linebacker at 21, Kenneth Murray, Oklahoma. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Are they really going to, people really see the Eagles going with a linebacker? But I've seen Murray in some mock drafts as high as, 19, so it seems that he's a guy that would be in play there.
Yeah, no question. I mean, they have a desperate need at that position. I would argue their need at that position is even greater, if anything, than their need at wide receiver. So that's part of it. Second part of it, as I talk about all the time, yes, there are exceptions to every rule. And I use running back as an example. The Eagles have confirmed to me multiple times, look, they don't typically value a running back in the first round. I said it last year with Josh Jacobs. Everybody was like, Josh Jacobs. I knew they weren't taking Josh Jacobs. I said it on the show 100 times. They weren't taking him. They're not taking him. But guess what? 2017, go back to our shows. I told you they were going to take Christian McCaffrey if he was there. Eagles confirmed it. They would have taken him, a running back, because they thought he was that type of player to destroy the seam. I don't know if they think Murray is that type of player, but what I can say is if Jeremiah says they could potentially take him, that means the organization likes him. I still ultimately default to they would rather trade out, but if you can't find that trading partner, that's where you say, well, this is the best player left. And that's potentially how Kenneth Murray lands at Philadelphia.
And for what it's worth, that Mel Kiper Jr. mock draft, which was 2 rounds long, also in round 2 at pick 53, had the Eagles taking a linebacker with that second pick in the second round, number 53 overall, taking a linebacker at that spot. So, people have even said they're not going to take a linebacker in the second round. Well, it's almost seeming like, hey, some people are mocking them with one in the first round, and now you're gaining more steam for the potential of that second round pick being a linebacker at number 53.
Yeah, I mean, they have to take one in the premium picks. Yeah. So I would say unquestionably in the first 3 rounds.
Jordan Brooks, by the way, was the guy he has going in the second round. Jordan Brooks from Texas Tech.
Yeah, and they have a lot of interest in Logan Wilson as well. He was one of the guys.
Wyoming.
They got in under the under the bar, so to speak, of when things got shut down. He was one of the few players that got in here for an actual top 30 visit in person before everything had to be scuttled due to the pandemic. So they have tremendous interest in him, and he's another guy who's originally people looked at him and said, well, he's played at Wyoming. He's got tremendous athleticism, but you could probably get him day 3, 4th round pick, something of that nature. He's another guy who's NFL teams like him a lot more than he was originally pegged, sort of by the draft people. So I've heard him going as high as the second round at this point. More likely a 3rd round pick, but it only takes one. It always only takes one.
It sure does. More on the NFL draft, go to the website, 973ESPN.com, and of course John McMullen at JF McMullen. Check out his stuff at Sports Illustrated as well. And of course back tomorrow for another edition of Football at 4. We are 8 days away from the NFL draft. It happens a week from tomorrow, and you can hear it all right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, John.
All right, thanks, Mike.
You got it, pal. It's the Football at 4. John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.